Here's a quick little video on how I made that loop and tie V-neck from my scrap gauze blouse. So first of all, whatever garment you're making, you've got the front opening. This could be a V-neck, it could be a different shape, it could be a scoop neck. Whatever shape it is, you need to make facing in the same shape. Facing is like a reinforcement onto whatever shape you've got. So instead of hemming it, you're going to put facing on, and this will create better strength for, well, whatever neckline you have. This one's a V-neck, so I've made a facing with a V. The other thing we're going to need is 2 strips of fabric, and these are about 1 inch wide, maybe 1.25 inches, and I have 2 strips, but you could really just use 1 long strip of fabric. And the first thing to do is to take these strips, fold them in half, and sew down the long side of the strips, and this will create the loops and the tie. Now, because this is only an example, obviously my tie is very short, but if you're doing this, then you might want a really longer tie to make it actually worthwhile. And of course, once that's sewn, turn it round. Now, I use a safety pin because I don't actually have a loop turner, something I really do need to get. But if you have a loop turner, definitely use that. But for me, actually, the safety pin works really quite well, and it's, it's an easy thing to do. Just pin it in, turn it round, and pull it through. Just make sure that you've got enough room in the strap, whatever strap size you're making, that it's, you've got the right size safety pin to go through it. So you don't want a bigger safety pin with a smaller tie. So yeah, right size. To make the loops, take a ruler and measure 2 inches. So this was just a random guess when I did it. I just thought I'd cut them out 2 inches just to make sure that there was enough room. You could probably get away with slightly smaller actually, but 2 inches I think was a good sort of size, if you're a bit unsure on how big you want those loops to be. Once they're cut, fold them in half. You can sew down these as well, or just tack them to make sure that they don't move. You could iron them as well, and then placing them onto the shape at the front. So this was a bit of guesswork for me when I did this, and again it's guesswork for this tutorial, but you could measure this out properly. Probably about 1.5 inches up from the point of the V might be better than the inch that I've done here. There's no pattern to this, so I'm not actually making a pattern. I'm just playing around with it, seeing what works. So yeah, put the loops wherever you want them to be in the placement. And what I'll also do is, just to keep this in place, when I put the facing on, I'll just sew down them quickly just to keep them there so there's no pins in the middle. So now we come to the facing, and you're going to pin this facing on top so you've got the loop sandwiched in the middle. Like I mentioned, the facing needs to be the same shape as the shape on the front. If it's not the same shape, it won't work. We're putting this facing on to not only reinforce the structure, but also so that we don't have to hem it. And then sew this down. I use the 1 centimetre seam allowance, but of course, your facing will probably be bigger than what mine is, but use whatever size seam allowance is on your pattern, or yeah, make your own seam allowance. So we need to cut into the point to remove some of the extra bulk, so I just do 1 clip down the centre, and then I trim away from the edges at an angle as well. And what I'll also do is, just to make it a little bit more flatter, as I'll take off the extra fabric on the loops as well. So I'll just trim that away, try and remove as much excess fabric as we can so that it's less bulky. Now we can iron it out. So I've got a little tiny iron here. It's my favourite thing. It's so small, it's so cute. It has a steam function as well. So I did use a little bit of steam on this just to help it become nice and crisp. So I pushed the facing towards the centre, ironed it, turned it round, and then made that seam really nice and crisp. My point isn't exactly perfect here, but I'm going to ignore that for the moment because it doesn't really matter for the tutorial. But if I was doing this through an actual blouse, I would definitely make it a bit more neater than this. So taking that tie, of course, you can finish off the edge with the gauze. All I did was tie a knot because it was a nice rustic sort of feeling fabric, so knot worked really nicely, but of course you can sew the ends properly. And then we can just thread it through the loop. So I started on the left-hand side, took it from the top, then went to the bottom right-hand side, through the bottom left-hand side, and then back through the top right-hand side. It's like tying a shoelace. And yeah, that was basically the tie in the loops done, and it's finished. It's going to work differently for different types of fabric. So this is quite a stiff cotton fabric, but of course if you had more the softer gauze like I had, it works much more softly. It's not as harsh and crisp. So I thought it worked really quite nicely for that gauze. Probably a little less so for the cotton. If you had like a, I don't know, like a chiffon, that might be a little bit too lightweight, but for a sort of light to medium weight fabric like the cotton gauze, this does work really nicely for it. So as you can see, we have finished, and that is the V-neck done. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like and comment, and I'll see you next time.